Terence Bud Crawford's team still steadily putting a foot in their mouth about Jaron Boots Ennis and talks about the likelihood of an Errol Spence Jr. fight. I'm still going to cover this because people keep bringing this to me and making this argument that Boots chose not to fight Terence Crawford. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we're going to be in the 147-pound division where really the BS needs to stop about why Terence Crawford is not fighting Jaron Ennis and people trying to put the blame on Jaron Ennis when that blame is nowhere near Jaron Ennis. And the reasons that Terence Crawford's team is giving is ridiculous. Absolutely, positively ridiculous. Before I get into them, let me welcome you back to the channel. If you're new to the channel, please accept my invitation. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon so you can be notified of when we release more videos. And if you're a longtime subscriber and supporter, thank you so much for your support. First things first, I am still believing that Terence Crawford is going to fight Errol Spence Jr. this next fight because I don't see where else he's going to go. I personally just think that Errol, Terence, the PBC and all that are just waiting until these fight cards get settled. And eventually, then when they run out of options, for Terence Crawford realizes he has run out of options, they're going to make that fight again because that's money on the table to make. And it's very, very rare that people leave money on the table. So that's what I think is going to happen. However, one of my favorite YouTube channels is a guy named Bernie the Boxer who's on the team of Terence Crawford. And although Bernie is not the biggest fan of mine, I'll live. I do appreciate this guy really does know his boxing. And you listen to him about when he talks about the history of boxing, you can really learn some things. Obviously been a lifelong fan. He's been a participant in top amateur boxer, has had a professional career, trains fighters in the B&B gym in Omaha, Nebraska. The man has accolades as it relates to boxing that should absolutely positively be respected. He is much more than just a hype man for Terence Crawford, even though he's clearly a very energetic personality and has the ability to generate energy for people while they're in the ring and really intense atmosphere. I think it's unfair to call that man a hype man. He's a professional. He's a professional in the boxing industry. That said, though, he is either not telling the truth or he's clueless about how the sanctioning bodies work. When you say and ask questions like, why didn't Jaron Ennis take the WBO route if he wanted to get the fight with Terence Crawford? That being a justification, I suppose, for Terence not fighting him. Also said that Jaron Ennis doesn't have enough fights at 30 fights. That doesn't seem that nowadays 30 fights is not that many fights. Wow to both of those, okay? And I say this to people all the time that come on the channel and try to debate me about different topics, that most times you're going to lose a debate when you start with the conclusion and you work backwards and try to line up your facts to support your conclusion. The conclusion of Crawford's team must be that Jaron Ennis' fault that the fight's not getting made. He hasn't done enough. Let's take the 30 fights is not a lot in the modern era. That is absolutely ridiculous. 30 fights is more fights than Gervonta Davis has. It is more fights than it is as many fights as Devin Haney has. It's more fights than Shakur Stevenson has. It's more fights than Errol Spence Jr. has. It's as many fights or more fights, I do believe, than David Benavidez has. I don't know if Bivol has many more fights than that. 30 fights at the point in time when you have 30 fights and you've been a professional for 8 years, that's a lot, especially when you're talking about people that once they get to contender status, fight twice a year. That's a lot. Okay. So yes, back in the day, you had fighters that had 60, 70 fights, like Willie Pep, he said took 60 fights before he got a shot. Right. But how many fights did Terence Crawford have before he got a shot? I do believe it was 23. I do believe it was 23 and at a younger age. And he had not fought any better competition than Jaron Ennis has fought to date before he got in there and was given the opportunity to fight Ricky Burns. The best win before that was Breedis Prescott. That's what put him on a 140-pound fight against Breedis Prescott. Boom. The next fight, he's with Top Rank and he's getting a fight at he's getting a shot at Ricky Burns. So no, Jaron Ennis has had plenty of fights in order to get there. Now, the WBO route stuff. This is bananas to me for two levels, on two reasons. Number one, Jaron Ennis was in the WBO, but he was not the number one guy in the WBO. He was not in that position. That guy was Virgil Ortiz that had that position. And Virgil Ortiz and Golden Boy were talking about forcing a mandatory with Terence Crawford. Another problem with that mandatory thing is that the mandatory was not due. The mandatory for Terence Crawford, because he is a WBO super champion, is 18 months, not 12. 18 months passed between his last WBO mandatory fight, which was against Sean Porter in May. So the WBO mandatory would not have become due until May, when the fight with Errol Spence Jr. was already set to go in July. So if he would have waited for it to come due, he'd still be waiting. It would have never been ordered. The fact that he became the IBF interim champion, he actually became Terence Crawford's mandatory faster than he would have been if he went the WBO. To say that he would have had to go to the WBO would have meant that he would have had to have that ordered after March to become the mandatory, after May of 2023 to become the mandatory, and that mandatory would have had to been ordered, which it would not have been. So as of right now, he would still be in the position of being a number one guy or number two maybe in the WBO for a mandatory title. It's still not been ordered. So how exactly was that going to help? Especially since he knew and everybody else knew that there was going to be a fight between Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. for the undisputed title. And the winner of that fight was going to hold all the belts. So it really didn't matter whether you went the IBF or the WBA or the WBO or the WBC. It didn't make a difference at all. So, and this is no shot at Bernie the Boxer, but this is the same thing people keep telling me on my channel and making this argument that asking why Jaron didn't go the WBO route. What difference does it make? If you're in a circle, what difference does it make if you go left or you go right? You're going to wind up at the same spot because that's what was going to happen. Terence Crawford held 4 belts. He was fighting for 4 belts. The winner of Errol and Terence Crawford was going to be, the IBF was going to be their mandatory, the WBC was going to be their mandatory, the WBA and the WBO. These are lame excuses for not fighting Jaron. Just what the truth is, Terence doesn't want to fight him because Terence wants to make more money than fighting Jaron Ennis. Don't say that Jaron Ennis hasn't had enough fights. He's got 30 fights. How many fights did Igis Kalvanakis have before Terence Crawford fought him? How many fights? Come on, man. This is ridiculous. The man's got 30 fights. I do believe he's got more fights than Teofimo Lopez. He's got twice as many fights as Josh Taylor had when Josh Taylor became the undisputed champion at 140. He had more fights than Terence Crawford had, than Devin Haney had when he became undisputed at 135. Man, it's just ridiculous excuses. And that's the only way to describe them. Ridiculous excuses. The truth of it is that Terence doesn't want to fight the guy because it's not enough money or it's too much risk because of the age of of Jaron Ennis. And all of these ridiculous arguments about how it almost makes it sound like people are looking out for Jaron. Like, no, we don't want to fight you because we know you're not ready. We want to give you more time to develop. BS. You're not trying to get a kid any more time to develop. You don't care about that kid and that kid's welfare as a boxer any more than you care about any other boxer. Jaron Ennis deserves a fight if Terence Crawford keeps those belts, Jaron Ennis deserves a fight against Terence Crawford for those other belts, just like any other champion in a division deserves a shot against the other champions in that division. If there's more than one champion in the division, the order in which you fight those champions, is up for debate. And, people should be able to be free to pick which champion they want to fight as long as they eventually get to all of them. If you are the mandatory for somebody, that right there tells you that you deserve the fight, not your belief of that, I just think that if we just let them fight if we just wait longer and we allow him, give Jaron another 3 years and another 15 fights, wait till he gets to 45-0 and he's 30 years old. Then he would be ready. And Terence Crawford will be over 40 and retired. How convenient. Anyway, that's my take on the matter. Please let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Deuces.